Good evening. The date is February 13th, 2026. From the humid, chaotic streets of a transformed Caracas to the drone-saturated skies over eastern Ukraine.
And across the silent, tense waters of the Indo-Pacific.
The world is moving faster than the ink can dry on the headlines. Welcome to the Deep Dive. I'm your host, here to help you navigate the currents of history as they happen.
And I'm joining you to help read the charts. Tonight, we aren't just looking at isolated incidents. We are looking at a tapestry of power, of strategy, and the very precarious balance of peace.
It's a year that has already redefined the rules.
It really has.
Now, tonight's broadcast is brought to you by ProWave AI. And before we get into the heavy stuff, I want to clarify something for you about how we know what we know.
This is important, yes.
The intelligence we are using to build this deep dive, the raw data, the connections, the source documents, it is all generated by Stylo News.
Right, and this is crucial context. Stylo News isn't just another news aggregator. It is the consumer-facing application of Stylo Intel Ops.
Which is the heavy-duty software suite used right now.
Right now, by government, the military, major global businesses, all to track these exact events.
So in essence, you, the listener, are getting access to the same grade of tools designed to support global decision makers.
Professional-grade intelligence right in your pocket. We're looking at the dashboard as we speak.
Let's put that intelligence to work. Tonight, we are analyzing a specific theme, America First in action. We're looking at the National Security Strategy, or NSS, and how it's playing out.
In real time. We've got a lot of ground to cover. We need to unpack the situation in the Western Hemisphere, specifically that intervention in Venezuela.
And then Europe, with the war.
And, of course, the nuclear chess game happening in the Indo-Pacific.
Our mission tonight is clarity. We're here to identify patterns, key players, not to generate fear, but to generate understanding.
So let's get into it.
Let's do it. I want to start with the mood in Washington, because looking at these reports from Stylo, the vibe has, well, it's shifted. We've been reading through the weekly assessments from January and early February, and there is a very distinct change in tone from the United States government. It feels heavier.
More direct. It is different. If you compare the language in the National Security Strategy now to, say, 2024 or 2025, there's a huge move away from words like risk management.
Or strategic ambiguity.
Exactly. The new operational terms for 2026 are enforced clarity and coercive enforcement.
Enforced clarity. That sounds like a euphemism for do what I say or else.
In a way it is, but it's a specific doctrine. The core principle being cited is peace through strength.
Okay.
The assessment from early January makes a key judgment. The United States has moved into a phase of deliberate strategic assertion. Basically, the administration has decided that the only way to reestablish long-term deterrence is to be willing to accept short-term escalation risks.
So they're willing to break a few eggs to make the omelet. I mean, usually the goal of diplomacy is to avoid escalation.
And that's the paradox. The logic here is that by avoiding small escalations in the past, the U.S. allowed a gray zone to develop where adversaries could mess around without consequences.
I see.
Now, the U.S. is signaling it's better to have a tense, sharp confrontation to set a boundary rather than letting things slide.
But the world gets a vote, right? The bad actors aren't just going to sit there and take it.
Exactly. And here's where it gets really interesting. The adversarial landscape is reacting to this enforced clarity. We're seeing coordination between what the reports call revisionist states.
China, Russia, Iran, North Korea.
Those are the ones.
I've heard people throwing around terms like Axis of Evil 2.0. Is that what we're seeing? A formal military alliance?
Not exactly, and the distinction really matters. A formal alliance implies they all have the same goals, that they'll die for each other. That's not what's happening.
Their objectives are different.
Wildly different. China wants economic dominance. Russia wants territorial security. Iran wants regional hegemony. But they're coordinating their narratives.
Like a marketing team.
Almost. More like a synchronized disruption campaign. They're using these gray zone activities, actions that hurt the U.S. but stay below the threshold of declared war.
Economic statecraft, information warfare.
All of it. They are trying to paint U.S. actions as destabilizing, to make the U.S. look like the bully in the schoolyard.
Which brings us to the biggest story of the last 2 weeks, the Western Hemisphere. If we're talking about the U.S. looking like a bully or a sheriff, depending on your view, we have to talk about the Trump corollary.
The Trump corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. Yes, this is the new operational reality for 2026. The Monroe Doctrine historically was about keeping European powers out.
Right.
This corollary, as it's being applied now, is about the U.S. actively enforcing hemispheric primacy to prevent criminalized states and hostile foreign influence close to home.
And we saw this go from theory to practice very, very quickly with Venezuela. I want to dig into the details here because the headlines were just chaotic.
They were.
The U.S. military conducted an operation in Caracas. This wasn't just sanctions.
No, it was kinetic. It was a decapitation strike against the regime's leadership. And the outcome was, well, it was significant. The capture and detention of Nicolas Maduro
And his inner circle.
and the dismantling of what the U.S. identified as the narco-state leadership.
Okay, so they caught the guy. But what happens to the country? Who is running Venezuela right now?
That is the volatile part. The U.S. has declared a temporary U.S. governance authority.
Temporary U.S. government.
The stated goal is to stabilize the country and this is crucial, restore the oil infrastructure.
I can just imagine how that phrase lands in Latin America. It has to trigger some serious historical trauma in the region.
It lands with a thud. It has polarized the region completely. On one side, you have U.S.-aligned governments like Argentina, Ecuador, Honduras.
They're expressing support.
Either tacitly or explicitly, yes. They view Maduro's removal as necessary for regional stability.
But on the other side, the reaction must be fierce.
Fierce is an understatement. Left-leaning governments, specifically Colombia, Mexico, and Cuba, have condemned the action. They're citing sovereignty.
If you can do this to Venezuela, who's next?
That's the fear. And it's not just words. Look at Colombia.
I saw the top line number, 30,000 troops. Well, let's actually think about what that means.
Yeah.
Colombia deployed 30,000 troops to the border.
It is enormous. Think about the terrain there. Jungle, mountains, porous crossings. Colombia isn't deploying them to invade.
It's defensive.
Absolutely. They are terrified of a refugee tsunami and, more dangerously, the spillover of violence. You have remnants of the regime, militias, all heading for the border.
And Mexico.
Mexico has formally rejected any U.S. military operations on its territory. They are drawing a hard line in the sand.
I want to use the Stylo app for a second here because I saw a detail earlier that I want to verify. I'm pulling up the casualty reports vector.
Yeah.
Okay, here it is. This really stood out. Cuba?
The Cuban presence.
Right. Stylo is citing a confirmation from Havana about the deaths of 32 Cuban officers during the U.S. operation. 32 officers. That's not a diplomatic mission.
No, that's a military detachment. And that data point is what the U.S. administration is using to justify the corollary. They point to those dead officers and say, see? This wasn't a Venezuelan government. It was a puppet regime.
Wow. It exposes just how deep Havana's role was.
Absolutely. Meanwhile, Russia, China, Iran, they're having a field day with this on the information front, broadcasting 24/7 that this is imperial overreach.
The classic information warfare strategy.
Take the facts, reframe the narrative, make the enforcer look like the aggressor.
Okay, let's hop across the Atlantic. We've got this huge assertion of power in the Americas, but what is happening in Europe? It feels like the Venezuelan news sucked all the oxygen out of the room.
It did, but the Russia-Ukraine war hasn't stopped. Ongoing might even be too soft a word. It's a brutal war of attrition. The assessments describe it as having no enforceable political settlement in sight.
And the winter tactics. Usually fighting slows down, but the reports are saying there was no pause.
Historically, general winter slows things down, but technology has changed that. Drones, long-range missiles, both sides are using them so intensely that the traditional winter pause is gone.
The fighting is relentless.
It is. Russia agreed to a temporary pause in strikes on Kyiv until February 1st, but that was tactical, not strategic.
Just a chance to restock.
Likely. But the Ukrainians are hitting back in a new way. They've expanded what they call kinetic sanctions.
Kinetic sanctions. That is a very sterilized way of saying blowing stuff up.
It is. Specifically, they are targeting Russia's shadow oil fleet.
Let's explain that for everyone. The shadow fleet is this armada of old, uninsured tankers Russia uses to get around price caps, right?
Correct. Ghost ships that move Russian oil to Asia. Sanctions on paper weren't stopping them, so Ukraine decided to stop them physically.
A significant escalation, taking the war to the high seas.
It is.
So where does this leave the U.S. and NATO? With the America First approach we talk about, is the alliance holding together?
It's holding, but the glue is changing.
Yeah.
There is friction. It comes from the U.S. pushing a more transactional approach under the second Trump administration.
What does that mean in practice?
The U.S. is essentially telling Europe, you need to restore your civilizational confidence and take responsibility for your own defense.
Civilizational confidence. That is a heavy phrase.
Well,
It
yeah.
sounds almost Existential.
It's meant to be. It's a critique of European pacifism. So Europe is now debating strategic autonomy. They're realizing they can't just rely on the U.S. security umbrella anymore.
They had to build their own capacity.
Factories, ammunition, logistics, they are scrambling to rearm because they aren't sure if the U.S. will always pick up the phone.
Which raises an important question. If the U.S. is busy in Caracas and Europe is scrambling to build tank factories, what happens in the Indo-Pacific?
That is the nightmare scenario. The strategists call it cumulative risk. We'll get to that. But first, let's look at the nuclear tensions. Because while everyone is watching Venezuela, North Korea and Iran are heating up fast.
Okay, North Korea. I saw a report from Stylo News about a greenhouse farm. I admit, I almost scrolled past it.
Yes, on the surface, it sounds innocuous. February 2nd, a massive greenhouse farm inaugurated in Sinuiju. Ribbons, smiles.
But you have to look at the split screen.
You have to. While they are cutting ribbons on farms, they are simultaneously advancing large-caliber rocket systems and testing ICBMs.
Feed the people, arm the missiles.
Exactly. It's a dual-track strategy. And we have a Workers' Party Congress scheduled for late February. The expectation is they will prioritize expanding the nuclear arsenal.
And Iran. That feels even more volatile.
Iran is a simmering pot. There are ongoing talks in Oman trying to prevent escalation, but the intelligence suggests tensions are intensifying over their nuclear program.
And Israel must be watching this like a hawk, if the U.S. is distracted.
That's the danger. Israel has ongoing surveillance. If Iran crosses specific red lines, the assessment is it could trigger a unilateral Israeli military response.
And the Gulf states are warning the U.S. direct.
About the sustained missile threat from Iran, yes. They're worried they're sitting ducks.
So we have North Korea ramping up, Iran testing boundaries. What about China? They're usually the quiet ones in the room.
China is playing the long game. The assessments describe their strategy as incremental escalation.
Which means what exactly?
Think of it like termites in a house. You don't see the house fall down in one day. China isn't trying to start World War III tomorrow.
They want to normalize coercion.
Precisely. They push a little bit here, a little bit there, a Coast Guard ship where it shouldn't be, then they add another. And if the U.S. reacts, the U.S. looks like the aggressor.
It's the boiling the frog strategy.
It is. They want to erode U.S. alliance credibility slowly without triggering a direct war. They want to win without fighting.
So, what does this all mean? We have Venezuela in chaos, Ukraine in a stalemate, North Korea building missiles, Iran on the brink, and China releasing termites into the foundation.
It feels like the board is lighting up everywhere at once.
It does.
And that brings us to the future outlook section of our analysis. The key theory for 2026 isn't about one specific war. It's about cumulative risk.
Okay, let's unpack that. We usually worry about the big one. You're saying we should worry about the many small ones.
The danger this year is multi-theater stress. Imagine a miscalculation in Venezuela, a clash involving those Colombian troops. That draws U.S. attention.
Logistics, political capital.
All of it. At the same time, Russia pushes harder in Ukraine, knowing the White House is distracted. And seeing the U.S. stretch thin, North Korea decides to launch a provocation.
It stretches the bandwidth of decision makers. There are only so many hours in the day.
Precisely. It tests U.S. decision-making timelines. Can the administration handle 3 crises at once? That is what adversaries are testing. And it's not just military. Economic security is now a contested battle space.
Supply chains.
Supply chains, energy infrastructure, financial access. These aren't just commercial issues anymore. They're national security targets.
So if China slows down exports of rare earth minerals, while the U.S. is trying to build weapons for Ukraine,
The gears start to grind.
it sounds like we're in a period where the line between peace and war is blurrier than ever.
It is. And that is the paradox. The U.S. is enforcing clarity, drawing hard lines, specifically because the world has become so blurry.
The strategy is to force adversaries to choose.
Back down or fight. The risk is that eventually someone might choose to fight.
That is a sobering thought. We're seeing a reordering of the global board, a heavy hand in its own backyard telling Europe to grow up, staring down nuclear threats in Asia.
It is a high-stakes poker game. And for you, the listener, the takeaway shouldn't be panic. It should be awareness.
Right.
Understanding that a price spike in oil might be due to a drone strike in the Black Sea, or that a travel advisory is linked to a grand strategic shift in Washington.
Everything is connected. And that is exactly why tools like the one we use today are so vital. We've been synthesizing a massive amount of information here.
And we didn't just Google it. This was all powered by the Stylo News application.
If you've ever wondered how intelligence analysts connect these dots, how they find that report about the 32 Cuban officers, for instance.
Stylo News is basically that power in your hands. It pulls from over 250 sources: news, social media, video.
And the translation piece is huge. It means you aren't just reading the Western press. You're reading what locals are saying, what regional blogs are reporting, translated instantly.
It uses something called vector search plus RE. I know it sounds techie.
But basically, you can ask it a question like, what are the implications of the Venezuela operation for oil prices? And it builds a briefing for you with sources.
You can customize personal intelligence style briefs, just like the one we presented today. It turns you from a passive consumer of news into an active analyst.
So if you want to run your own deep dives, download the app. You can subscribe for on-demand AI-powered news at www.stylonews.com.
It's definitely worth a look if you want to understand the why behind the headlines.
Before we go, I want to leave you with one final thought. We talked about the U.S. enforcing clarity. But in a world of deepfakes, AI-driven information warfare and shadow fleets, is clarity even possible?
Or is the battle for truth the real front line of 2026?
Something to think about. Thank you for listening to this deep dive. We want to know what you want to hear about next. Reach out to us, follow Stylo News on your favorite social media,
Be curious.
and stay informed. Good night.